From the Edge Media Studios in downtown Indianapolis, this is Indiana Issues. Here's your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazz.
Hello, and welcome to Indiana Issues, the monthly public affairs program where we go beyond the headlines and sound bites and bring you Indiana's newsmakers in their entirety. I'm your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazz, the editor and publisher of IndianaPolitics.org, coming to you from the Edge Media Studios in downtown Indianapolis. Well, with about 30 days and change left, yes, only 30 days. It seems like a lot longer. The campaign will be over. The president will be elected, new Senate, new Congress, new governor, new legislature, the whole 9 yards. And we have been polling as of late, and so we'll be sharing those polling results with you as well on today's program. So let's go ahead and get this party started. Joining me in studio is our good friend, Libertarian Brett Klopfenstien. So, Brett, always good to see you. Thank you very much.
Hello, Abdul.
Also joining us online via Zoom is our good friend, Republican Jim Merrit. Jim, good evening, or good morning, or good afternoon. Hey, Jim, how's it going?
Howdy.
And also our good friend, former state representative Terri Austin, one of my favorite Democrats in the state of Indiana. So, Terri, thank you very much for joining us as well.
Thanks for having me, Abdul.
All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Let's go to our first set of poll numbers, Jacob, if we could. The first set of poll numbers, we looked at the race for governor here in Indiana, and our poll by ARW Strategies, we surveyed 600 likely voters with a margin of error of 4%. Mike Braun, 44, Jennifer McCormick, 37, Don Rainwater, 9, and undecided, 10. So, Jim, let me start with you. What do those numbers tell you?
Well, it tells me that Mike Braun, his support in the Republican Party is just a little soft. I think in all the campaigns that I participated and watched over the years, we have at least a 52 to 55% Republican base in the state of Indiana, and Democrats are 40 to 45, and so that undecided is big, and I would think that Senator Braun, if he wants to become governor, will be reaching out to those undecideds, and that could be anything from the suburbanites to Republicans that didn't support him in the primary.
Brad, let me ask you. Obviously, like I said, Mike Braun, 44, Jennifer McCormick, 35, Don Rainwater, 9. Don seems to be polling a little bit better than Libertarians usually do in governor's races. Do you expect those numbers to stick?
I think so. I mean, he polled 11+% 4 years ago when he ran for governor. I'm actually pleasantly surprised to see that support has stayed fairly steady. And I think when it's all said and done, he'll probably be at 10 or 11% again. It is curious. Mike Braun is definitely coming in under what you would expect a Republican candidate to be. And I don't know if that has something to do with his running mate or the fact that Mike Braun doesn't necessarily give you the warmest fuzzy hugs. So I'll be curious to see if that margin shifts much. But given that this is a presidential year, I just think so many people are turning out for the presidential election, and there's going to be a lot of straight party voting. I do think it's Mike Braun's to lose, certainly.
Actually, we'll be looking at straight ticket voting just a bit. Terri, let me get your thoughts. Your thoughts on Jennifer McCormick. Those numbers are relatively consistent with what we've seen in other polling places. She's about anywhere from like 9 to 12 points behind. Can Jen pull it off in the next 30 days?
Well, I believe she can because her momentum is building, and the Braun campaign has made some serious mistakes, and I think are starting to alienate some voters, at least based on what I'm hearing and talking to Republicans, Democrats, and independents, including some undecideds. They're very disappointed in the campaign, not only that he's run, but some of the comments of his running mate. I know they're trying to keep him under wraps, but I think that's hard to do. She's coming out with thoughtful proposals that are solid, that are bipartisan in nature. And I just believe that, you're going to see her pick up steam. The other thing is, I've changed my opinion about polling over the last several years. And here's why. I think people are less inclined to tell you what they're really going to do. It's harder to get a really good sample because so many people ditch their cell phone or ditch their landlines, and they just don't answer the phone anymore. I know texting is employed as a strategy, but I think it's harder to get a good read on a poll, quite honestly.
Oh, I know, and we tend to agree. That's what we use when we did our polling. Brad, we did sample size and sort of did what Terri just said. Sort of took into account the fact that people don't like to talk and won't do numbers that they recognize, but we still think like 600 likely voters is a good size. Those undecided voters, where do you think they're going to go?
Ultimately, I think that they're probably going to split three different directions. I don't see those swaying one way or the other too much, unless there is some sort of a big October surprise or a Richard Murdoch gaffe that happens by one of the two major candidates. So, or, I mean, I guess there's always the possibility that Micah Beckwith says something really dumb and alienates some Republicans. So, but I would think by and large, those undecideds are probably going to split probably 40%, 40%, 20% to the other three to the three candidates.
You're watching Indiana Issues. I'm your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazz, the editor and publisher of IndianaPolitics.org. Going through some polling in the upcoming race. The election just 30 days away. We polled with our good friends at ARW Strategies. Jake, let's go to the U.S. Senate race. The Senate race seems a lot more in kind with what we normally see. Jim Banks, 49, Dr. Valerie McRae, 35, Andy Horning, 2.6. But a lot more undecideds in this race, 13, and Jim Banks is under 49%. Terri, let's start with you. Obviously, like I said, the Jim Banks is in the lead, but still under 50%. Does that give Democrats hope?
Listen, I think anytime you've got a sitting incumbent who is under 50%, they are in trouble. And that goes for Mike Braun at 44, Jim Banks at 49. I mean, Jim Banks has really not run any campaign at all, and he's been missing in action. I wonder what people are thinking, who his advisors are, and what their strategy is, because in these last 30 days, it's not uncommon for people to change their mind. You know, they get frustrated over one thing or another, and they just go in. I think the other thing is your polling tells us not as many people are picking straight party tickets anymore. There's going to be a lot of ticket splitting in this race, in all these races.
Brad, your thoughts on Andy Horning, like I said, a longtime fixture in Indiana politics, only coming in about 2.6% in the race for the U.S. Senate.
It's interesting. Andy has good name ID. Andy has never really been able to break free from that 3% Libertarian base. Allegedly, this is going to be his last go-round. We'll see if that holds up. But Andy has been a good flag bearer for the Libertarian Party now for 25 years. And I would like to see him do really well in this race. It's interesting. I'm not seeing a lot of campaigning from anybody in this U.S. Senate race. Jim Banks obviously is well known up in Northeast Indiana, not as well known statewide, but I think his campaign thinks it's ours to lose. There's not a debate for this race. And Valerie McRae just doesn't have the name ID, but I don't think she has the money to build name ID. So I think it's probably on Election Day, the numbers are going to be real close to what you see in your poll.
Jim, let me ask you, we had a conversation about a week or so ago with Indiana Republican Party Chairman Randy Head. And Randy told me what his biggest concern was, that the fact that Republicans would get complacent after 20 years of basically controlling the state of Indiana, absent one term for the U.S. Senate, one term for the superintendent of public instruction. He said, worried about people being concerned, like Republicans will win, I don't need to go vote. Is it a danger when you look at the governor's numbers and the U.S. Senate numbers?
I think former Senator Head is exactly right here. That's why I called Mike Braun's numbers soft, because obviously it's a red state and he's not polling that way. And I foresee people coming home. I don't believe Rainwater will get the amount of votes that he did last time. I think he'll probably end up with maybe 5 or 6 or 7% of the vote, and the remaining of what he was able to garner in 2020 will go to Braun and Republican. I think Mike Braun wins this 55%. And it's interesting. Terri Austin mentioned as Banks as kind of an incumbent, and that's how he's been treated he's a U.S. House member, but people think he's in the Senate. He was in the Indiana Senate, but he's not in the U.S. Senate yet, and so he has run a very, very quiet campaign, but I foresee him getting way over 50% as well. I'm with Terri when it comes to polling. I've changed my mind a little bit on this, and there's a good possibility that straight line ticket voting won't be as prevalent this time as it has been in years before.
Speaking of over 50%, we also pulled the Attorney General's race. Indiana Attorney General Todd Rokita, despite our personal issues, Rokita's ahead, 51 to Destiny Wells, 35. No Libertarian in that race. Terri, my theory is that Todd Rokita will probably win this race, but because of his issues with the disciplinary commission and the hearings after the election, won't be able to serve, and the new governor will probably pick out new attorney general. Am I crazy for thinking that? Well, I'm probably crazy for lots of things, but am I crazy for thinking that in particular?
I would say anything can happen. And if that catches wind, it could throw some support behind Destiny Wells. I'm not sure people are excited about having more appointed positions at a state level. They've already seen significant turnover, with the Secretary of State's office, with the Treasurer's office, trying to think if there's any others. But voters like to be able to, Hoosier voters like to be able to pick who their representatives and their elected officials are.
Brad?
So it's interesting. Todd Rokita so far is the one Republican over 50% in the polls that we've seen so far in this show. But he is also on the air doing some campaigning. I'll be very curious to see what does happen with the disciplinary commission. I would say it's probably 50-50 on whether he gets removed from office. But the fact that that's even out there is amazing. Although the one thing I do recall, the last time he ran, he was probably the most unpopular Republican, but yet he led the statewide races as far as Republican votes. So there's a significant number of people that like him, and I think he will be just fine in this race.
Jim, your thoughts on the Attorney General's race and Todd Rokita and being able to get him reelected, but probably not necessarily being able to serve?
Yeah, Bill, you and I have talked about this countless times on WIBC and State House happenings. Todd Rokita is, when it comes to the Lincoln Day dinner and the base of the Republican Party, is very, very popular. And in a primary situation, if he had to run a primary, he could probably count on 15% of the Republican Party support and just kind of rolling out of bed in the morning. And so Todd's going to win. He'll probably be the lead vote getter, and it'll be interesting to see what happens down ballot from him.
Also, gentlemen, let's take a look real quickly at the presidential race before we take our quick break here. Donald Trump, 55%. Kamala Harris, about 40%. RFK, 1.2. Libertarian Chase Oliver, 0.4. Undecided, 3.8. Indiana has always been a traditionally Republican state. Brad, see anything changing in there anytime soon?
No. I've felt this election cycle more than in the past, and I don't know if it's just because I'm more in tune with it. Explaining to people how the Electoral College works is fascinating, and I'm amazed how many people don't understand it. Indiana's Electoral College votes are going to go to Donald Trump. I wish they would go to Chase Oliver. I'm one of his electors. But the fact is, it is a no-brainer for Donald Trump in the state of Indiana. So unless you are in one of those 5 or 6 swing states where, the margin of difference is a couple percent, it doesn't matter this election cycle.
Terri, your thoughts real quickly on the presidential race in Indiana?
Well, that's not necessarily a surprise for me. However, I will tell you, again, I think people are coming out for Kamala Harris. I've had a number of, believe it or not, Republicans come through Democrat headquarters in Madison County asking for Kamala Harris signs. They said, look, we're just over this. And I mean, to say that she's going to win Indiana, I don't think that's going to happen. It could, though, but I do think it's going to be interesting to watch individual counties because I can see the sand shifting.
Jim?
I think with Governor Mitch Daniels and Barack Obama, with the split ticket with that, I think that was an anomaly. And I think Trump wins going away in the state of Indiana, and your poll is spot on.
You're watching Indiana Issues, the monthly public affairs program here coming from the Edge Media Studios in downtown Indianapolis. Going to take ourselves a quick break. When we come back, and we'll look at the governor's poll numbers, the state on the right track, the wrong track, and also we asked the marijuana question. Of course, we had to do that. You're watching Indiana Issues. I'm Abdul-Hakim Shabazz. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Indiana Issues. I'm your host, Abdul-Hakim Shabazz, the editor and publisher of IndianaPolitics.org, coming to you from the Edge Media Studios in downtown Indianapolis. We're talking about some polling that was recently done by my pollster, ARW Strategies. We're looking at a number of various races with our guests, Libertarian Brad Klopfenstien, Republican Jim Merrit, and Democrat Terri Austin. My friends, I wanted to look at a couple different numbers here and juxtapose them because this I thought was one of the most interesting things in our poll that we looked at. We looked at the governor's approval ratings, a job that Eric Holcomb has done over the past 8 years. 55% approve, 34% disapprove. Kind of makes sense, no big shocker. But here's the other interesting dynamic, because usually a governor's poll numbers tend to parallel the right track, wrong track numbers. When we looked at whether people thought Indiana was on the right track or wrong track, Jake, let's throw this chart up here if we could. 37% thought the state was on the right track, 42% the wrong track, and 20% don't know. I have a theory, but I want to hear your theories first. Jim, how do you sort of reconcile those two, that the governor has high approval ratings, but a clear plurality of folks think Indiana's on the wrong track?
Well, first of all, the governor's likable, and we came through the pandemic. His numbers have always been high, and he did no wrong in a lot of opinion with a lot of people in the state of Indiana. Democrats like him, Republicans like him, and libertarians as well, and independents. But with the wrong track question, and Abdul, I am so glad that you polled this year, because this shows you that people are very unhappy and they're undecided. I think it's because of the overall feeling of politics. In your question regarding the top three issues that people are concerned about, really are federal issues, and they're not happy about it, inflation and the like. And so I think that's a demonstration of unrest about the overall feeling of the world and the country, as well as the state of Indiana. And so Holcomb's likable, but people are experiencing a lot of stress these days, and that's what this is showing.
Brad, Holcomb 55% approval rating, but 47% wrong track.
I tend to agree with Jim. Governor Holcomb, he is likable. I mean, I like him. Most people I know who have met him like him. But that does not change the fact that Indiana seems to be in a bit of a general malaise right now. 15 years ago, the state was growing, our population was growing. By all accounts, where we stood in relation to other states, we were on the increase. We seem to have settled back down closer to the bottom when it comes to educational attainment, incomes, housing, standard of living. And I think that you can like your governor, but also recognize that we are falling behind the rest of the country. And I think that's where the state on the wrong track numbers come from.
Terri, let me get your thoughts on this if we could.
I'm going to take a totally different approach to this. I don't think the wrong track numbers have so much to do with Governor Holcomb. I think they have to do with the Indiana General Assembly. And I think voters are, quite honestly, fed up with some of the extreme policies and the constant churn. I mean, it's a churn in education policy. Our economic development strategies that they have employed and passed are causing us to drastically lose ground. And we are at risk. I mean, people used to joke and say Indiana could be the Mississippi of the Midwest. Now, Mississippi's passing us. Quite honestly, they're sending 91% of their kids to college. So, we're trying to say, oh, you don't need to go to school. You don't need higher ed. You don't need training. We'll get you in training for trades and things. And believe me, I think that's important. However, you still need to have some 2-4-year degrees and beyond if we want to attract those high skill, high paying jobs that aren't as risk to automation.
Okay, here's my thought. And Jim, Brad, Terri, I'd love to get you guys' thoughts on this. My theory is that people like the governor, 55%, but I would also think people think the city's on the wrong track, and I blame part of the problem on social media. If you think about it, what is social media? It's a big, giant echo chamber. So if you're miserable, you want to find other people who are miserable with you also. But then you go online and see, hey, these people are going on vacation to Mexico. These people are having cigars, martinis, blah, blah, blah. My life sucks. And so they think that overall, they like the governor, but they think their life is horrible, in part because of the social media echo chamber. Terri, you got a smile on your face. What do you think?
Well, I think social media does contribute to it, but I will also tell you that there's some truth to that. People are having a hard time, and you can't just blame it totally on inflation. I mean, the quality of jobs in Indiana has been at risk. We're now a lower average wage than we were when Mitch Daniels was governor. Folks, we have lost ground, and people just need to admit it and say, look, what we're doing is not working, and they need to stop changing things every year.
Brad?
Did you have a crosstab in this poll that says, do you follow Abdul-Hakim Shabazz on social media? Because that might affect it, because all your social media is either you having a martini, you having a cigar, you being on vacation, or you relaxing, or occasionally chiming in on politics saying things are in the toilet. So the people who follow you...
Don't forget about Love Your Hot Wife, too, by the way.
Yes, exactly. You do have a lovely wife. So I do tend to agree with you that social media is not good. I mean, when you talk about crime statistics and people, especially with kids, say, well, you got to be a lot more careful. Times have changed. Things aren't like they used to be. They're right. Things are a lot safer than they used to be. But now with social media, you only hear about the bad stuff. And I think it taints people's perspectives of where we are. I still think Indiana's falling behind, but I don't think it's as bad as people say it is.
Jim?
I think that social media amps out the general feeling that you're talking about here. And yet, when you look at the national news and you look at our leaders right now, we really don't have anybody in leadership in this country that has a sunny disposition, that has hope, and that has that Reagan-esque feeling that we can achieve again. No one's really talking in those big rooms, as I call it, and without leadership that gives hope for tomorrow and that gives people just a good feeling when they get up in the morning. I think that's when you kind of slide off into this pole of this negativity, and all you really see from those that are in places of power is the negativity that is hitting this country right now, and people do lose hope in this type of mindset, this type of vacuum, and we need leaders to speak highly of our country and our state, and right now we have a vacuum. There's a vacancy in that slot of life, and I think when people hear negativity, they feel negative.
I want to bring up a couple other slides real quick here, if we could, Jacob. Let's bring up the next slide, if we could, because I want to say one of the questions we asked, and this is top before, do you plan to vote straight ticket? 21% straight ticket Democrat, 29% straight ticket Republican, and 45% plan not to vote straight ticket. And Terry, this gets into something that you mentioned, that we could see a lot of non-straight ticket voting, which could have a major impact on the upcoming results we expect to see in November.
I think that's true. I mean, I'm not surprised by these numbers at all. And I'm going to go back to something Jim said when he said, that people want leaders that give a message of hope and that life can be better. You must have tuned out from Kamala Harris's messaging, because that's exactly what she's tried to do. She's trying to tell people we can build a better America together. And, she's not necessarily picking on any particular ethnic group, making up stories. I just think that that's what's caused her message to resonate with so many, particularly young voters and women.
Brett?
First, on the straight ticket voting, it is time to get rid of straight ticket voting in Indiana. If you've grown up in Indiana, you've had it as an option every year, you don't know that there's only 5 or 6 states left in the country that still even allow straight ticket voting. You talk to people in New Jersey and other places, they're like, what is straight ticket voting? It is time to get rid of it. For anybody who runs for office, every single one of them has chosen to put themselves out there, work hard, and try to gain votes by meeting the electorate. I think that the voters owe it to those candidates to at least acknowledge who's running in every race and then vote accordingly. You can still vote for every Democrat. You can still vote for every Libertarian. You can still vote for every Republican, but at least acknowledge which races are on the ballot and do it. I also want to say I was very happy to watch the vice presidential debate this week, and going towards just the tone of the election. Both of those candidates were friendly and generally cordial to each other. And there needs to be a lot more civility like that, just in politics in general. Jim Merrit and I, we actually have a podcast called Merrit in the Morning, and our whole slogan is work hard and be nice. And there should be more of that.
Jim, your thoughts on, like we said, the whole issue about straight ticket voting here in Indiana?
Well, also nationally, you see Trump doing very well in states, but the U.S. Senate candidate from the Republican Party is not doing as well as Trump in those states. And so I think the straight ticket voting question has become integral in Indiana because your polls reflect that. And so there will be a lot of people scratching on election day, and I think your poll and the results of that poll demonstrate that. People are thinking for themselves, and there will be people will be spending a lot more time in the booth when they vote this November, or and because we will be voting throughout the month of October. And we'll see. It'd be interesting to see if Republicans actually vote early, because traditionally Republicans vote on Election Day.
We got a few minutes left here in the program. I want to skip, Jake, if we could, to our last slide, because this is the question I've been waiting for all day to get this one out here. We asked a question to our 600 likely voters, our poll conducted by ARW Strategies. Have you ever tried marijuana? 41% yes, multiple times. 13% yes, but only once. No, 40%. And this was the number that got me. Nearly 5%, 4.6% said they were unsure or don't know. Here's my thing. If you're unsure or don't know if you tried it, you probably did, and you probably had some really, really good stuff. Jim, we'll start with you.
Well,
not with you using marijuana, but just on the poll results.
With the unsure and don't know, probably have tried it many times, but I think everybody knows that I believe that we need to regulate it and know what's in it, and then legalize it. I'm really glad you asked this question. We know the Republican Party in recent polls support this. I'm glad that Senator Braun spoke about in recent times, has spoken about the idea of medical, and that's a good way to start. It's different from Governor Holcomb, who says that when it's legalized nationally, the state of Indiana will follow through. But I'm really glad you asked this question, and Indiana is ready for this. We just need to take the time to understand what's in it and regulate it.
Brad?
I'm a little surprised that the Republicans haven't gotten more on board with this. So obviously in your poll, 41% said that they have used it multiple times. But I've also seen other polls where even the people who have not tried it or have tried it once and didn't do it, or haven't even done it, they still say, sure, it should be legal. And I think that legalizing it helps take away some of the pressure on our legal system, certainly our jails. Just suddenly you're no longer sending somebody to jail because they've got a little bit of weed. And the fact that I think the last I saw, 3/4 of Hoosiers said they would be cool with legalizing it. I can't believe that there are not more champions in the State House saying, yes, we need to make this happen.
Terri, I'll give you the last word.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, it's all around us. People I know are driving to Michigan. They're driving to Illinois. It's the easiest place for them. Friends are bringing it back for them, which I wouldn't advise necessarily, but it's going to happen. I believe the groundwork has already been laid for when marijuana is legalized. They've done it through some of the CBD legislation and everything in there. The big challenge is going to be who gets licenses, how are the licenses going to be structured, and what's the enforcement mechanism for it. And I will tell you, having friends who live in Colorado, this is a word of warning to Indiana. Friends who live in Colorado, and they said the biggest challenge has become since they legalized marijuana was keeping it out of the schools, in middle school and ahead. Kids with gummies, and teachers are spending their time trying to prevent some of this. And quite honestly, you guys, that's not a problem we need to have.
All right. Well, like I said, our guests on the program today have been Libertarian Brad Klopfenstien, Republican Jim Merrit, Democrat Terri Austin, and big agenda thanks to our friends at ARW Strategies for doing our poll. You can find all those polling results and then some even more at our parent website, IndyPolitics.org. I'm Abdul-Hakim Shabazz, the editor and publisher of IndyPolitics.org. Thank you all very much for being with us. Early voting starts next week, so be sure to go out and vote and participate and make your voice heard. We'll talk to you next time here on Indiana Issues.
Guys, it was good to see you.
Okay, we're done.